Isn't the simple answer to Judge Kavanaugh is the 50 states can't tell the military what to do, correct?
Certainly, absolutely correct, Your Honor.
They don't have, we've already said that in Boyle.
Correct.
And we made it clear. If the military orders them to do something, they have to do it.
Correct.
Military contractors, though.
Well, the military contractor. So what Justice Kavanaugh is talking about is almost a field preemption concept.
Yeah.
That absent a conflict, an entire field is preempted. And what you're saying, I think, by using Little and Mitchell, is that entire field in our history has not been considered preempted, correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right, so now let's go
Hey everyone, welcome back to 45th Perspective. If you're new here, I'm glad you've tuned in. And if you've been with us before, thanks for coming back. Before we dive in today, a quick note. If you find value in this discussion, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future breakdowns of key political events. And if you'd like to support what we do here, the research, the editing, the deeper dives, you can join our community on Patreon at patreon.com/45thperspective for as little as $5 a month. Every contribution helps keep this channel independent, ad-free, and focused on clear analysis.
So now let's go down to something more, I think. The interest that's being protected is military interest, correct?
Yes.
All right, it's the federal government's military interest.
Correct.
You only get liability if the state law conflicts with military orders in some way.
Correct.
And so if there's no conflict, there's no interest to protect, correct?
There's nothing here because Floor violated what the military wanted it to do.
That's the question that Justice Thomas asked you, which is there has been no directive by the state that the contractor had to do X, Y, and Z. It was a directive of the military, correct?
Correct, Your Honor. I mean, so we think that the state law duty also applies here, the duty of reasonable supervision.
It does because the government didn't direct unreasonable conduct.
Correct.
If the government directed unreasonable conduct, there'd be no liability, correct?
Correct. The government did not direct Floor to disregard supervision duties.
Mr. Chang.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
We'd be creating a new area of preemption law if we say that there is field preemption
Especially through
when
federal
there
interests.
is no conflict whatsoever.
Well, footnote 11 of Garamendi says, if a state were simply to take a position on a matter of foreign policy with no serious claim to be addressing a traditional state responsibility, field preemption might be the appropriate doctrine. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion in the case law about how you distinguish field and conflict, but, you know, field preemption in an area of uniquely federal interest, you know, you can call it conflict, you can call it field, but the word field has been in our case law at times on this kind of thing. I'll stop there, but I just want to get that comment out.
Today we're looking at a recent hearing in the U.S. Senate where senior government officials were questioned about major shifts in U.S. vaccine policy. The hearing unfolded in a tense atmosphere, with members of both parties raising serious concerns about how the nation's public health institutions are operating, what's driving their decisions, and how everyday Americans are likely to be affected. Our goal in this video is to pull together the factual record of what was said, how the different sides position themselves, and what this all means for ordinary citizens. Then I'll share my own view, what I believe is going right, what is worrying, and what we should be watching going forward. So let's jump into it. At the heart of the hearing was scrutiny of how the federal government, specifically the Department of Health and Human Services, the CDC, and other related agencies, has handled vaccine policy and public health leadership. Attention was paid to recent changes in who's in charge at the CDC's Immunization Advisory Board, how much career scientists are being involved, and whether politics is influencing decisions that many assume should be rooted strictly in public health science. One of the major flashpoints was the dismissal of the CDC director and some senior officials, and allegations by those former officials that they were pressured by political appointees regarding vaccine scheduling changes, and that the career scientific staff had been sidelined. The hearing also explored the potential consequences of these decisions, the risks to public trust, the risks to readiness for future pandemics, and the broader impact on public health. Members of the Senate hearing pushed for understanding. Why were these changes made? What is the justification? What are the possible downstream effects? And how are everyday Americans, especially vulnerable populations like kids, pregnant women, and people with weaker immune systems, going to be impacted? Let's break down how each side presented their points. The proponents of the changes, the critics in the hearing, and the broader positions that emerged. Those defending the changes argued that the reforms were needed to refresh the system, ensure the vaccine policy apparatus is more responsive, less bogged down in bureaucracy, and more aligned with broader health goals beyond just infectious disease mitigation. In other words, the aim was to modernize vaccine policy. The senior officials testified that the insertion of new leadership, dismissal of some older figures, and recalibration of the advisory committee structure were done to bring in fresh perspectives, including people focused on chronic disease as opposed to only acute infections. Public health threats evolve, and institutions must evolve with them. They argued that the system remains intact, that vaccines remain safe and effective, and that the public health mission continues. They said this isn't about undermining science but repositioning priorities and processes so that public health agencies aren't stuck in outdated patterns. They also pointed out that many Americans want a broader definition of health and prevention, looking beyond pandemic emergencies toward long-term wellness, chronic conditions, and mental health. The shift reflects that broader mission. The critics, including senators from both parties, raised serious concerns. Career scientists and former officials testified that the removal of senior staff and restructuring raises concerns about institutional memory, scientific independence, and whether political objectives are driving what should be science-based decisions. Senators asked pointed questions. If career scientists are excluded or marginalized, how can the public trust that vaccine recommendations are based on the best science and not influenced by politics? Some senators raised specific, real-world consequences. Whether certain groups were effectively denied access to vaccines or if guidance changed in a way that reduces protection for children or pregnant women. There were also concerns that if trust is lost in these institutions, people may refuse recommended vaccines or turn to misinformation. Critics also argued that these changes may have unintended consequences, like a resurgence of vaccine-preventable diseases or weakened surveillance capacity if the institutional structure is disrupted. They stressed that transparency is crucial. Did the public get advance notice? Are the processes clear? Are decisions open to scrutiny? They felt not enough had been done. So why does this matter to ordinary Americans? Trust and confidence matter. If you're deciding whether your child gets a certain vaccine or whether you get a booster, you're influenced not just by the scientific facts, but by how much you trust the institutions recommending them. If people believe recommendations are driven by politics rather than evidence, you risk more vaccine hesitancy. That can lead to outbreaks, higher healthcare costs, increased absenteeism from school or work, and greater pressures on local health systems. Access and equity are also key. Any shift in priority or process can affect who gets protected when vulnerable populations may suffer disproportionate impacts if guidance changes or certain vaccines become harder to obtain. This could mean higher out-of-pocket costs, more health stress, and wider disparities. Readiness for future threats is another concern. We often talk about pandemics and emerging diseases as rare events, but history shows they're not. If institutional capacity, career expertise, advisory continuity, and public health trust are weakened, we may pay for it when the next major outbreak hits. This means local hospitals, health departments, and your family's health could be more vulnerable to the same time. The defenders of the changes argue that broadening public health priorities to include chronic disease, mental health, and long-term wellness is necessary. Chronic illnesses like heart disease, diabetes, and obesity are major drivers of health costs and reduced quality of life. If public health policy evolves to address these more effectively, that could benefit many people. But the risk is that these reforms might come at the expense of infectious disease readiness. Finally, these changes affect everyday decision-making. As a citizen, you want to know who's making the decisions, what the process is, and whether you're getting the full facts. For parents deciding on immunizations, for people with compromised immune systems, or for communities with fewer resources, these questions matter. This is not abstract policy talk. It directly touches your health, your family, and your trust. So, after looking at the facts and arguments, here's where I land. On the plus side, the argument that public health institutions need to evolve and adapt is valid. We can't assume the model we used for COVID-19 remains optimal for ongoing health threats. Chronic diseases, mental health issues, long COVID, and vaccine distrust are real problems. Reform is justified if it addresses these challenges effectively. However, the risk of reforming too quickly, too broadly, or without adequate transparency and safeguards is significant. Vaccines are high stakes and require public trust. If career scientists are sidelined or if decisions appear ideological rather than data-driven, this undermines confidence and increases hesitancy. I also worry that messaging risks being ahead of mechanisms. If the goal is to broaden public health priorities, but this weakens infectious disease infrastructure, we may face negative outcomes in the short and medium term. Public health is a long game, and the loss of institutional memory, experts, and surveillance capacity is not easily replaced. Critics raised valid alarms. Questions about justification, whether career staff were heard, whether the public was informed, and whether trust is safeguarded. Defenders had a credible rationale, reform, broader mission, innovation, but the execution plan must preserve foundational capabilities and public trust. For ordinary Americans, the takeaway is this: keep an eye on implementation. The proof will be in how smoothly the transition happens, how continuity is preserved, how transparency is maintained, how data is shared, and how communities feel about the process. Ask, are there clear lines of accountability? Is guidance clearly communicated? Are the risks and benefits explained? Is independent review happening? Ultimately, this is a moment of opportunity rather than a lost cause. If agencies rebuild trust, modernize while maintaining core capabilities, and emphasize science and transparency, this could be a positive turning point. But if the transition is rushed, opaque, or ideological, public health readiness and trust could be undermined, which matters for everyone. Over the next few months, I'll be watching for how the newly configured advisory committees operate. Will scientific experts have meaningful involvement? Guidance for vulnerable groups, children, pregnant women, immunocompromised. Messaging to the public, is it transparent, clear, and trustworthy? Responses to outbreaks. Is infrastructure ready? Are monitoring systems intact? Measurable health outcomes. Are there early signs of negative effects or positive improvements? Congressional oversight. Will there be protections for scientific independence or further politicization? So there we are. This hearing isn't just another Washington spectacle. It touches on how we protect our health, how institutions function, and how trust between citizens and government is built or eroded. The debate is important, and so is how it's being handled. I encourage you to think through your own position. Are you comfortable with the proposed changes? What concerns you? What reassurances do you need? Are you seeing evidence that institutions are maintaining rigor, transparency, and independence? These questions directly affect people's lives and families. Now I'd love to hear from you. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of this hearing stands out to you? Do you lean more toward reform or caution? What should be the priority for public health agencies right now? Let's keep the conversation respectful and thoughtful. We're here to learn together. And one more time, if you found this helpful, please like the video, subscribe to 45th Perspective, and consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/45th Perspective. Your support allows deeper dives like this. Thanks for watching. Stay thoughtful, stay informed. I'll see you next time.